What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Division 2 build video. Now, if you're a seasoned veteran player, you may already have an idea of what this build is. If not, let me tell you, this build just simply hits way too hard in my opinion. It should not hit this hard. But let's get into it, shall we? Alright guys, here we go. So we are using the Negotiator's Dilemma gear set. Yes, I know what you're thinking. This is so not what every fanboy is using right now in PvP. And I'll tell you why a large population stopped using this gear set. But first, let's get into what the bonuses give you, okay? Now, two-piece bonus gives you 15% critical hit chance. 3 pieces gives you an additional 20% critical hit damage. And then, of course, you have the 4-piece bonus called the Hostile Negotiations. Now, listen very carefully. It says critical hits mark enemies for 20 seconds, up to 3 marks in total. I'll go into a little bit more detail as to how that works and why it's so efficient. Next, it says when you critically hit a marked enemy, all other marked enemies take 60% of the damage dealt. And this is why, when this gear set was introduced, just about everybody was using it. Because all you had to do was mark one either NPC or one player in PvP, go after another one, kill him, and that other enemy that you first marked would take 60% of that damage dealt. Now, eventually the devs decided, or they were persuaded, that this was just way too overpowered, and they nerfed it for PvP. How did they nerf it? Well, let's take a look. There you go. So where it says when you critically hit a marked enemy, all other marked enemies, now it says within 15 meters take 60% of the damage dealt. Before, there was no restriction on the distance. Now in PvP, the player or the NPC has to be within 15 meters of each other for them to receive that 60% damage dealt. And this is the reason why everybody stopped using this gear set in the Dark Zone. But guess what? In Skirmish, the maps are so small that this gear set is still very much viable. Let's face it, 80% of the time you are always within 15 meters of your enemy. And as you saw in the opening clips, the amount of destruction that this build does on top of this talent is just way too overpowered, in my opinion. Now, we are using 4 pieces. We're using the mask. As you can see, I have the core attribute at 170,000. And then I have crit chance, crit damage. Now, this is a crit build. We are not stacking any more armor except for 1 piece. So keeping in mind that that makes you a bit of a glass cannon. In other words, you're squishy. So how you move, how you play makes a huge difference. This is not simply face tanking whoever you think you want to. Now the second piece of Negotiator's Dilemma that we're using is the holster. I actually had to craft this one. I didn't have one. This was the best one that I got before I ran out of resources. But you want weapon damage on the core attribute, and of course you want critical hit damage on the attribute. The third piece of dilemma you want is the knee pads, and again you want weapon damage on the core and critical hit damage on the attribute. And lastly, on the gloves, you want weapon damage on the core and again critical hit damage on the attribute. Now, this is pretty much a red build except for the mask, and it is a crit build. So obviously, an SMG is the way to go as far as your primary weapon. If we look at the second piece bonus and the third piece bonus, you're pretty much being given critical hit chance and critical hit damage to begin with. So you actually may be able to reach that 60% critical hit chance cap right away without having to actually use any crit chance mods on your vector. Let me show you. You can see on my vector, all my mods are crit damage, and crit damage. Okay, so now that leaves the chest piece and the backpack. With the chest piece, I went with a Walker and Harris for that 5% weapon damage. Again, 15% weapon damage on the core, and then crit damage and crit chance on the attribute. Here's the talent that I want you guys to use and become very familiar with. It's called Trauma. Why is this talent so good? Why am I not using, for example, the Ridgeway's Pride? Well, because this talent actually has two bonuses. It has the first one, which applies blind to an enemy hit in the head, and it also applies to bleed. So by simply shooting at your enemy, you aim at the head, you aim at the body, you've now bled them, and you've also blinded. For the backpack, I went with Grupo Sombra for that 15% critical hit damage. Again, 15% weapon damage on the core and critical hit damage and critical hit chance on the attribute. And the talent on the backpack you want is Wicked. Applying a status effect increases total weapon damage by 18% for 20 seconds. Alright guys, so earlier I told you I was going to explain a little bit more into detail as to how you mark your enemy. So here we are, I'm in the open PvE world. As you can see, I've marked 2 NPCs. There's a third one that's marked. And they're all within 15 meters, even though in PvE it doesn't matter. I kill this one, and then automatically the other 2 are vanished, because they received 60% of the damage dealt on the first NPC that I killed. And that's basically how Negotiator's Dilemma works. It's pretty awesome and pretty deadly. If we take a quick look at the character sheet, we have 86,000 as our weapon damage, 28,000 PvP weapon damage, 60% critical hit chance, 195% critical hit damage. We have 70% headshot damage, 83% all weapon damage bonus and 30% submachine gun damage bonus. Give this build a try, guys, and like always, let me know in the comments what you think, how you would tweak it, make it better, make it fit more your playstyle. And like always, guys, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you're new to my channel, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace out.